politics of the imagination. Can the imagination be seen as a way of constructing the world? And then it further goes on to say what are the ways in which artists imagine the world and how the artists imagining the world can help us constructing a possible future.
Seeing Europe not as the center, but as a province of the world. Or perhaps, to use Dipesh Chakrabarty's words, what it means to provincialize Europe. With regard to political history, he argues to recognize a deep depth to European thought, but at the same time to know, and I quote, how universalistic thought was always and already modified by particular histories, whether or not we could excavate such pasts, unquote.
That's something that struck me as well, thinking about globalization, is that actually this word globalization was in the dictionary introduced in, for instance, in 1951. And it was very commonly used in 1960, and I started to think like, okay, you know, you have the independence of all the countries, so you can't use colonial anymore, imperial, we need a new word. So basically now we have globalization.
Then globalization and the mediatization of culture also means the complicity of institutions of art and big capital. And this we see especially in the context of competitive relationships between these so-called global cities, you know, whose status as world-class cities depends on this ability to create a culture industry, the spectacular museum architecture, and to host these mega exhibitions.
First of all, I'm interested in how finance can turn everything and everyone into an entity from which value can be extracted. The logic of financialization is about reducing the world into properties that can be remixed, interpreted, valued in financial terms. When potentially everything can be turned into a derivative, this also means that everything can be owned by someone else. Secondly, I got captivated by how global finance is everywhere, yet I cannot see, hear, touch, or meet it anywhere. It penetrates our lives all the time, but it doesn't manifest itself in any time or place. Rogue Waves is a work about probably one of the most opaque, automated, and speed-up processes of the present moment, high-frequency trading. In this work, the ultra-fast global financial transactions of computational trading are given a material form and physical presence. In the tradition of the tally sticks, that you probably all know, ancient objects such as bones, wooden sticks to record value and transactions, Rogue Wave consists of a series of engraved metal sticks. They each carry the cutout of a trading pattern connected to a specific event in which algorithms illegally manipulated financial markets.
Media representations feed and shape how we imagine ourselves and others and how we think and feel about the world we live in. And in my talk today and in my book at more length, I treat media images, narratives, voices as invitations to us to imagine ourselves and others in a world that's characterized by rapid processes of globalization. So how does the world appear on our screens today, on our smartphone screens or on big screens? How do media representations and what do they tell us about the world? And crucially, what remains invisible? What's not on the screen? And what and who are excluded from these representations, and what truth claims, in the Foucauldian says, these exclusions produce. At the same time, these very representations, the logic that organizes them, is fundamentally comparative and importantly competitive. The montage of these numerous images of the same event, of far-flung places, inherently foregrounds the differences between them. And crucially, these differences are evaluated and hierarchized by a very specific criteria, and the criteria is from Femke's presentation. It's about money. The negative and the often brutal implications of privileging economic successes are obscured. Low-income people living in these cities, working over the period of the new year, often doing extra work to make ends meet and to survive life in the city, these are completely absent. So the global imagination, when we talk about global imagination, in my mind, one of the fundamental things to bear in mind and to ask is that it's as much about who and what we do not see as whom we are allowed to see. Yeah?
So the mission of the Ghana think tank is to develop the first world. We collect problems in the so-called developed world and then send them to be solved by think tanks that we established in Iran, in Cuba, in Ghana, El Salvador, Palestine, and a group of incarcerated teenage girls in the US prison system.
A problem we kept running into there was lack of diversity. We are all white and wealthy, they complained. The think tank in El Salvador responded that they probably were actually a lot more diverse than they realized. They just weren't counting certain people. Who's fixing your house? Who's tending your yard? I bet they don't look like you.
We met around the theme of hauntings, about absences and visibility and invisibility. And in one of her recent projects, I hope I don't misquote, she thinks about this question of the ghost, the ghostly figure, the ghostly presence, mapped onto how we even think about people in Europe today and how Europe has its ghosts happening now. And we've been in an ongoing conversation around whether ethnographic museums and their collections can also be thought of as ghostly presence that haunt or present.
It is the very multiplicity of meanings and associations ghosts and haunting can have, and the ambivalence that characterizes their most widespread uses as referring to what exists in between life and death, in between materiality and immateriality, in between visibility and invisibility, and in between the powerful and the powerless, that makes them so powerful, so productive as tools to analyze a process like globalization that shares this ambivalence, remaining to some extent ungraspable, even as its effects are palpable across the world. Appearing and coming to haunt as a victim, appealing to empathy, generosity, or guilt, can be powerful, as the recent case, and we just discussed this, the recent case of the photograph of the drowned Syrian boy Aylan Kurdi shows. And I want to add to the discussion before that, what I found very interesting was the invisibility of the mother of the boys. And when I later saw a picture of the mother, which was one of the few pictures that was actually shown, it was a picture in which she was wearing a headscarf. And this made me suspect that one of the reasons that she was kept out of the image so much was that she was precisely not looking like someone we might identify with. Whereas with the picture of the little boy, the primary framing was, this is a little boy that could be anyone's little boy, because he's wearing the same type of clothes as your little boy or my little boy.
As we, as 5 curators, were preparing the exhibition in dialogue with a number of artists, I believe we were all a bit overwhelmed with the burden of dystopia. But then Esther came at the end of his day with the suggestion that an exhibition that haunts is perhaps a more productive exhibition than any other, so I feel much less burdened by this idea of dystopia at the moment. Because what haunts, of course, is also that which in society is unresolved. And the point is perhaps not that we make exhibitions or artworks that just point to an easy resolution. How could that be? But that actually points to things that need our work and our continued investment and attention. So if there is one challenge, I think all of us at the end of this project should take on board, is then how to translate this as something that is not temporary. How to translate all these realizations and questions to the core of our business, to the ground on which we organize our museums, our collections, and our exhibitions, so that migration, inequality, questions of mobility and immobility, questions of privileged worlds and underprivileged worlds are not these things we take up once in a while, but actually they become the foundation of how we organize what we present, because in the end, I think we can conclude they are not states of exception, they are the condition in which we live.